Welcome back to RealClear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. Joining us for the second half of our show is Fintech entrepreneur Chris Hale, founder and CEO of Countable, a trade finance company focusing on developing and emerging economies. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Chris, we've seen an explosion of fintech non-banking finance experiments going on around the world, from equity crowdfunding to peer-to-peer consumer credit to developing country microfinance. You've zeroed in on developing country trade finance aimed at smaller entrepreneurial businesses. Start from the top. What is trade finance and how is it different from traditional lending?
So we zeroed in on trade finance based on what we learned from the entrepreneurs we work with. So it wasn't like we had this grand idea to start there and identified a market opportunity. We wanted to build a technology platform that would bring high-quality entrepreneurs and emerging economies into sort of the mainstream financial world. And what we learned is that they were able to win very high-quality contracts that were part of the global supply chain. So doing things like buying medical device equipment from General Electric and importing them into East Africa and selling them to a very high-quality chain of hospitals supported by the Ministry of Health. Which, when you look at that transaction, it's a great transaction. But they had difficulty financing it because of the complexities involved with cross-border trade. So when we identified that opportunity with really, really high-quality entrepreneurs, we built Countable around it.
So from a historical perspective, isn't this how the Rothschilds got started?
I believe there's a lot of wealthy families that were involved in things like merchant banking and cross-border trade. What technology allows us to do is actually bring it down to a transaction size that it's been very difficult to address before. In fact, my co-founder, Craig Allen, has done over $9 billion in trade finance securitizations at very, very high levels. And we're using his financial and legal IP inside of a technology platform to bring this to smaller entrepreneurs who are in markets that are tougher to finance.
So what I found most interesting about your business model, it doesn't require measuring or underwriting credit risk per se, which is hard enough in places like the U.S., much less Rwanda. What risks do you take and how do you assess and manage them?
There is some element of credit risk, but it's corporate credit risk. It's typically, the credit risk of a major multinational corporation, a hospital chain, a big university, a government ministry. And so those are relatively easy to assess. It's not consumer credit. The risk we are taking, though, is the execution capability of the entrepreneur. So we have to determine whether this entrepreneur that won this contract is someone who can get the deal done. And our technology platform does a number of different things. First, we ingest about 50,000 data points on that entrepreneur to analyze whether they look and act like a globally connected entrepreneur in international supply chain. And there's lots of markers in the data that tell us that they look that way. The second thing we do is we take that data and we basically run a KYC, which is Know Your Customer protocol, so we can identify that they are someone who is safe to do business with.
No arms merchants, no drug smugglers, that sort of thing.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And then the third thing that we do is with the entrepreneur, we build a project plan. And that project plan is sort of the plan of execution of this transaction. And then we measure the entrepreneur's ability to comply with that project plan because they deliver us all kinds of information through our mobile application around the execution of the trade. So when the medical devices are manufactured, there's a document there. When they get on board the ship, there's a document there. When they enter the country, there's a document there. When they're staged in the hospital, they send us photos. And then when the hospital signs off, there's another document there. And then when they get paid, there's another document. So all of that information that is non-financial is very valuable in trade, and that gets delivered through our platform. And so that allows us to manage that risk.
Now, do you escrow the actual payment, or are you just facilitating the transaction?
We do. We escrow the actual payment. So we pay the supplier directly and effectively through a special purpose trading vehicle, not to get too complicated, but we're a trader, not a lender.
Got it.
And so the end customer pays us directly or pays into an account that we have lockboxed. So we can take out our trade margin and the fees that we need to recover, and then pay the entrepreneur last. So they are very incented to finish the project successfully.
And where does the capital come from that you're deploying, and what kind of returns are your investors looking for?
We started out doing this off our balance sheet. The capital that we raised as a technology platform, we used that capital to get it right, sort of, learn what we needed to learn. Mm-hmm. And then once we got to a level where we felt confident that we could do this with other people's money, we launched a fund, a Delaware 3C1 fund, basically a private fund structure for accredited investors who wanted to take this risk and wanted to help entrepreneurs in these markets earn a return. We are currently about to close a rather large line of credit from a marketplace fund who will lend to us on our balance sheet that will allow us to scale this up. And to date, the investors in our fund have earned approximately mid-teens, low double-digit returns on these assets.
And the risk they're taking is pooled risk. They don't take risk on any individual deals.
That's right. That's right. And the value of this line of credit is it allows us to achieve greater diversification across a larger number of deals. And then, right now we do have quite concentrated geographic risk, and we're very motivated to sort of scale across other regions to minimize that risk.
For those just joining us, we're speaking with Chris Hale, founder and CEO of Countable. So, Chris, where does your deal flow come from? How do you find entrepreneurs to back, and how do you find new investors whose capital you can deploy?
There's really three places the deals come from. So, being a mobile-first company, the entrepreneurs can download the application, and that allows other entrepreneurs to be referred by the ones that we work with. So we do have sort of an organic growth strategy because we have a mobile application. The second is there are many, many companies and NGOs and organizations out there that have been helping entrepreneurs for years and decades. And those organizations have started to refer us some of their clients and customers because the problem that we solve is one that they do not. So they'll give them training and support and connections to opportunities, but a platform like ours is not something that they built. And the third one is kind of the most interesting, which is channels. So when an entrepreneur comes to us with a transaction like the one I described, the medical device, they bring GE equipment and they sell it to a hospital. Both General Electric is trying to sell more product into these markets, and then the hospital has a whole other host of entrepreneurs that are distributors or value-added resellers of product that they work with. So we reach out to the supplier, and then we reach out to the end customer and grow that way.
Describe a typical entrepreneur whose deal you financed.
That's a great question. So far we've done all of our transactions in East Africa, but we started to evaluate entrepreneurs in 8 other countries. Typically our entrepreneurs are ones who are involved in the global supply chain. So they're typically globally connected, communicating with companies that provide product into these markets, and there's someone who has the experience and capability and track record to win a competitive RFP process so they can outbid other entrepreneurs in competitive contracts. The biggest thing about our entrepreneurs is they are sort of hyper communicators. Because of the digital nature of our platform and sort of the mobile data model that we rely on, someone who is, there are many quality entrepreneurs out there who still use a feature phone. They don't have a smartphone. Those are not our customers yet. Right now, we rely on the customers who are digital citizens and use their smartphone to run their business because we can monitor that and track that and use that as an asset.
What do your statistics look like so far on a dollar volume basis? How many of your transactions have successfully closed and how many busted?
So we've had over $50 million in deals that we've evaluated and would have funded, but haven't had the capital available. So we've done $6 million in funding over 47 deals. And we've had 3 of them that have fallen into a workout. And that's, use the word busted. There are different scenarios in which they fall into a workout. One was really simple. The Minister of Health had some requirements that weren't quite met by the SME, and they had to deliver additional equipment. And so we modified that transaction, and effectively that's a workout. It wasn't a simple deal. But generally, we've had great success, and about 80% of the entrepreneurs that we work with come back to us for an additional deal and get better at what they're doing, and we get better working with them. So we've had a lot of traction that way.
I understand that unlike loans, the trade finance countable supplies never shows up on an entrepreneur's balance sheet. What's the impact of that on the entrepreneur's business?
Yeah, exactly. So The challenge of balance sheet underwriting is that most of these entrepreneurs, and this is even true in the United States, have the know-how and the capabilities to sort of punch above their weight when you think of their balance sheet. They can win contracts and have the capabilities to deliver on big deals. But when the bank looks at their balance sheet, they don't qualify. And so our structure really ignores the balance sheet of the entrepreneur and looks at the payment capability of the end customer. And that allows the entrepreneur to win bigger deals, to do more deals simultaneously, and to really grow in an outsized way compared to what their traditional P&L looks like.
Well, I wish I had somebody like you back when I was a venture capitalist.
We're working on it. It's an interesting model and one, like I said, that my co-founder's done a number of times over, but never at this transaction size, which is, for smaller businesses.
Chris, of all the places in the world to launch your trade finance business, why Rwanda? It has a pretty dicey history.
So if you had asked me when I started this company whether we would have started in Rwanda, I would have had the same question. My co-founder, Catherine Nomura, has been working with a group called Bigger Future that has been doing entrepreneurial business coaching in Rwanda for the last 6 years. And it's an entrepreneur out of Chicago that flies over to do that on his own dime and has made a tremendous impact in the country. And what that allowed us to do is work with some of the country's best entrepreneurs. And when you're building a fintech platform that relies heavily on alternative data sources and has to get smarter with every transaction you do, it makes a lot of sense to work with some really high-quality customers up front. So the Rwandan opportunity was based on that relationship. What we've learned since we've been there is that since 94, which is when the genocide took place, the country has reinvented itself and, in fact, is the second safest country in Africa to do business, in the top 40 in the world, according to the World Bank.
Interesting.
And it's just made amazing strides as a nation.
Boy, this is totally unknown news to most Americans.
It is. Interestingly, 1,500 Rwandans were recently in San Francisco for something called Rwanda Day. And the president was here and many ministers were here, and they were touring Silicon Valley trying to create business partnerships between them and Rwanda. Rwanda's finance community is one of the strongest in Africa, and they have a very strong technology ecosystem building there. So they came to San Francisco to tell that story, and I think it's one that's becoming more and more known.
Put a face on this. Share some individual stories of the actual entrepreneurs you've backed.
So we've had some great examples. We have an entrepreneur in Rwanda who has an amazing set of credentials. He's Oracle certified and Cisco certified. He does business with a company called Ubiquity out of Silicon Valley who's delivering air fiber, which is basically like fiber without digging holes in the ground through the sky. It's amazing technology.
I have that service just like that here at home in Boston.
And it's amazing. And he's got all that capability and all that training. And he does a great business building computer labs for girls' schools. And the schools are often funded by, NGOs here in the States or by the Catholic Church. They have a very, very strong backer. But he runs into the same problem. Is the school won't pay until the computer lab is there. And, HP or ASUS or whoever the company is won't ship until, they get paid. And so that challenge is there. And so we've been able to buy high-quality IT equipment and then get paid by a school that's backed by a U.S.-based NGO to build computer labs. And he's, helping girls learn to code in Kigali, Rwanda, and we've been able to help with that.
That's got to feel good all the way around. What else you got?
Another amazing story was we had an entrepreneur approach us that had won a contract with a chain of hospitals in Rwanda to import the components to build 24 incubators in hospitals. Prior to this project, there were 2 functioning incubators in Rwanda, which is a country of 12 million people.
Oh, my.
And they wanted to add 24 more. And all of the parts were coming out of Western Europe, major manufacturers, and the project was backed by capital from USAID. And we just bridged that gap, and it was amazing because we got photographs of the nurses being trained and the incubators being installed in the hospital. Super rewarding stuff for us, but also a great trade deal.
Now, you're a for-profit organization. This is not charity, right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's in the name. The name Countable is sort of about accountability. It's about measuring things. And I believe that profit and sustainability are aligned. We want to do this over and over and over again. And we need to build a business that can sustain itself so that we can.
We had a guest on several times from a group called Self-Help Africa that works mostly with rural farmers trying to connect them with regional markets so they can get better pricing and scale their businesses up. They compete with a lot of NGOs that give stuff away, but their motto is only profits can cure poverty. What's the broader economic impact been of your efforts in Rwanda, and how do you measure it?
The good news about our platform in terms of measuring is we track everything. Being a big data platform and one that's focused on fintech, we are required to. And so we look at profitability, we look at term, we can measure the projects all the way down to the SKU number of what we're procuring with the entrepreneur. And really what we believe is that by growing these small businesses or medium-sized businesses in Rwanda, they're going to be the ones that hire other people. And I think that's true across developing economies. It's great to help, an impoverished individual help to provide for their family. But if you really want to build a middle class and really want to build an ecosystem where jobs are created, you got to help these small businesses grow.
For those just joining us, we're speaking with Chris Hale, founder and CEO of Countable. Chris, paint us a picture of how fintech trade financing could scale. Assume that Countable will attract larger competitors if you're successful. How big is the total available market?
Interestingly, McKinsey just published the trade finance gap in emerging economies is documented at $2.2 trillion. So it's a big one. We're not going to address all of that, nor is it all of a fit for us. There are many, many sectors and industries we don't operate in and are unlikely to. However, it's a space that a lot of people are looking at. There's elements of potential blockchain technology that fit into this space. It's a big one. And I was just at the UN for the General Assembly, and Alibaba is focused on this space. It's something that Jack Ma, wants to see happen, because cross-border trade is a big part of what Alibaba is. And this kind of financing and this kind of model makes that more likely and more accessible.
So when are you going to put the Export-Import Bank out of business?
It's an interesting question. I mean, our goal is really to bring not only these entrepreneurs to our platform, but also a really high-quality asset like trade finance to mainstream investors. Trade finance to date has really been the exclusive purview of big banks and big governmental institutions. And it's a really high-quality asset that is kind of the lifeblood of the global economy. Trade is documented at a $14 trillion opportunity, and unlocking that and bringing it to mainstream investors is a big focus of ours.
Chris, the fintech sector has attracted a lot of venture capital, but it's expected to be facing a major shakeout. And in fact, we're already seeing signs of that in some of the peer-to-peer lenders. How do you expect this to impact Countable?
I don't want to sound conceited when I say this, but I think that this is relatively good for us. We've done a lot of heavy lifting in the early days to build a platform focused on a very high-quality asset that is structured very cleanly, and it's super data rich. And so, our platform isn't simply an online originator of consumer loans as an example. Embedded in our platform is the ability to create these assets, and they're new assets. And so I think there's a lot of interest in how fintech can bring these opportunities to investors, but consumer loans, it may be a saturated place to invest money. And so there's a lot of interest in reaching out into the broader asset classes that are available through fintech, and we're an example of that.
Where do you see Countable 5 years from now?
I would love to see Countable as a standard for how trade finance is done for small businesses. And we're building this to scale, and we're building this as a data model that other institutions can plug into. And we would love to bring these high-quality transactions that are originated by high-quality entrepreneurs into the financial mainstream. And if we can become that access point, I think that's great for Countable, and I think it's great for small businesses everywhere. How
can investors and entrepreneurs learn more?
It's a great question. So we have two ways for people to learn more. We have a website at Countable.com, and there's pieces there.
And that's with a K, right?
Countable with a K, yes. Downloading the mobile application for an entrepreneur submitting a project, you start to interface with our team. And our team is made up of high-quality finance people and third-party logistics talent that interfaces directly with these entrepreneurs. So if you're an entrepreneur, you can come right into the platform and start working with us. As an investor, we do have still available that fund where investors are coming into, and then we also expect to become very public with this line of credit and how it's going to help us grow in the coming weeks.
Chris, I've seen a lot of fintech deals come and go. This one really lit me up. Good luck with it, and thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks so much. Grateful for the opportunity.
That was Chris Hale, founder and CEO of Countable, here on RealClear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. You can check out RealClear Radio Hour on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at RealClearFrezza. And while you're at it, take a look at RealClearFuture.com for daily updates on the next big wave of technologies. If you missed last week's Veterans Day Battle for the Airfield special, including field interviews with both reenactors and World War II veterans, check it out on SoundCloud, YouTube, or iTunes. I bet you'll enjoy listening to it as much as I did putting it together. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Old Boston Restorations, for their support. Old Boston is a boutique property management company located in Boston's South End. Visit them online at oldbostonrestorations.com. That wraps up our show for this week. Please join us next week, same time, same station, when climate scientist Kerry Emanuel from MIT tries to make sense out of the global warming debate, and breast cancer expert Dr. Deborah Patt explains why government drug discount programs can sometimes drive up prices while reducing healthcare access for the very people they're trying to help. See you then.